We're live.
We're live.
We probably still wait a few.
Let's wait for a few more moments just to give people an opportunity to log in, and then we'll begin.
How are you guys today? You can leave some message on the chat. Oh, good. I see some friends here. Hello, guys.
So I guess we can say good evening to our Australian viewers. Good morning to our US viewers. Good afternoon to our European and Asian and maybe African viewers there. Hello to you all. I think it's probably a good time to get started. So hello and welcome to another itCraft webinar. Today we've got Karol Wegner, the CEO and the business strategist of itCraft, joining us, and Krzysztof Wojciechowski, a very talented senior developer and the head of itCraft's Flutter development team. And they're joining me today to answer 13 questions about cross-platform development. So welcome to you, Karol.
Welcome, everyone. Happy to be here.
And Krzysztof, welcome to you also.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here.
All right. So it looks like we've got a lot of people on board today. So it's really good to have you. We're excited to be able to bring you another webinar. Before we jump into the questions, I just want to mention that I've posted a poll here on the webinar. So in the poll section, you should be able to see a question: how much can you save in development costs using cross-platform development? I hope you can see that. And it's a question we might come across later in the webinar. So if you've got some comment, if you've got some idea on how much you can save, let's get your opinions now. Has anyone? Well, we've got 4 comments so far. Don't be shy, everyone. We'll come back to that, but throughout the webinar, please feel free to type in any other questions you might have that we might not actually cover. But just a bit of a background, a few months ago, we completed actually just very recently, we completed an ebook about the differences between cross-platform and native development, and it was really, really popular. We had so many downloads of the book that we decided to put on this webinar. And based on the comments and the feedback we got and some of the questions that we reached out to our network with, we came up with 13 questions that are really, really common when it comes to people deciding about their front-end development, whether to use cross-platform or whether to go native. And it's a really hot topic. It's a hotly debated topic. And today our objective is to basically dispel some of the myths and to hear from the experts exactly what we need to consider when choosing cross-platform or native development. So without further ado, let's start to uncover the 13 questions that we've been given. So I might just say also that we've got Karol, who's actually an expert in mobile app strategy, and Krzysztof, who's a senior developer, very experienced, and the head of our Flutter team, as I mentioned. So the questions are sort of divided up. The first part of the webinar is more technical, and as we move on, we'll move towards the business perspective. And of course, as we all know, the the business goals can only be met if you choose the right technology. So, of course, these two parts meet in the middle, and we'll do our best today to, as I said, uncover some of the myths and give you some helpful insight when it comes to choosing the right technology. So let's jump into it. We've got a really, really simple question to begin. It's a little warm-up question for Krzysztof, and for those non-tech savvy viewers we have with us today, what is cross-platform development? Krzysztof, I'm going to hand over to you.
All right, thank you, Garrett. So, yeah, to keep things simple, the general idea behind cross-platform is to use one framework to write the code once and use it to build apps for different platforms, so both in iOS and Android. So essentially, the goal is to avoid writing two versions of the code for one application.
Okay, excellent. Brings us to the next question. What are the main cross-platform technologies?
Yeah, so these days, the main players in cross-platform development are React Native and Flutter. And React Native was created by Facebook. It runs on JavaScript. And is based on their web network, React. And Flutter is built and backed by Google. It uses Dart, and it has a similar structure to web frameworks. Yeah, like React Native is similar to React. It's also really similar. And also a lot of apps were built with Xamarin, which was manufactured by Microsoft, based on .NET. But these days Xamarin has fallen behind React Native and Flutter in popularity. So it's getting harder and harder to find Xamarin developers, and not really a lot of apps are built, of new apps are built now in Xamarin.
Okay, so Flutter and React Native, and these are the two that we're going to focus on today. It brings us to another really important question when it comes to choosing the technologies. Will the end user, the people who actually decide the popularity and success of the app, will the end user distinguish the difference between the native and a cross-platform development, Krzysztof?
No, not really. I don't think so. Both React Native and Flutter advertise themselves as tools that are able to create native-like experience. I think this phrase will come up quite often in this webinar. And native-like means good UI, fluent animations. And in my experience, this has been the case with both these technologies. And generally, users are not able to tell the difference between native and cross-platform app. But user will definitely tell the difference between a well-written app and a poorly written app. And if you don't follow the guidelines, the result will be just ugly and clunky app, regardless of technology. In my experience, in one particular project, for example, I know that React Native required some additional styling, but in the end, it delivered pretty UI with not much effort. And Flutter comes with a rich widget library based on Google Material and Design guidelines. So it requires even less styling. You just get these tools. You can use them to build stuff. And depending on the complexity of the project, with high quality code, you can build a world-class app in cross-platform without the end user knowing it was coded with cross-platform framework.
Okay.
Maybe I can chime in here. So yeah, that is very true what Krzysztof said. Just wanted to emphasize that the tech you choose is a secondary to the quality of the code. So if your Flutter or React Native developers know what they are doing, you can produce a high quality end product despite the tech that you've chosen. Yeah. Just wanted to add that.
Okay, so to summarize, you can produce an equally good app in Flutter and React Native. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yes, you're very right.
Okay, good. That's what our viewers want to know also. Good. All right, so let's Christoph, let's go a little bit deeper in maybe some technology. What's the difference in capabilities between Flutter and React Native? If they both can produce a world-class app, what's the difference in capabilities, if any?
Well, on the surface, I think there are basically no differences or no major differences because both frameworks, as I said, produce native-like apps, and they do that pretty well. They offer similar ways of interacting with device-specific APIs like connectivity, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and so on. And the only difference, I think, comes from the way both platforms create UIs. While React Native reuses existing native widgets to build its UI, Flutter draws itself from scratch. And therefore, devs cannot reuse already existing UI components. And it may not seem like a big deal, but there can be serious consequences. I'll probably talk about them in a minute.
Actually, it probably leads to our next question. So what are the limitations of cross-platform in general?
All right, so one of the main concerns regarding general cross-platform is the size of the app, because cross-platform frameworks need to be included in the final file, and it's quite a burden. I'm talking like 10 or 8 megabytes of additional file size. And also Flutter has a serious limitation that I mentioned just before. And it's a consequence of its architecture, because it draws its components from scratch instead of using existing ones. You cannot reuse already existing native widgets. And it may not seem like a big deal, but it prevents Flutter developers from using Google Maps, for example. And there is an ongoing project that will allow to embed existing components into Flutter, just like React Native does. But currently, it's not stable enough to be used in a commercial project. React Native is known for its poor support for Bluetooth connection, for example. But from a developer perspective, you should be careful about communicating with the device in general, because cross-platform acts as a little bit like a middleman. So you can talk to the device APIs directly, like you would in a native project. Instead, it's necessary to write platform-specific code and provide a way to communicate with it from the framework. And it's in most cases it's not a big deal. This has already been done by the community, and there are many great packages available. But if for any reason you cannot use them, or you don't want to use them because they may not suit your needs, this work needs to be done from scratch.
Maybe just add a little bit to that topic of capabilities and limitations of the cross-platform. So if we would, we can go one step back and for a moment and understand why Google and Facebook invested in creating their cross-platform frameworks. Mobile developers and mobile app product owners, they have a huge problem. If they want to deliver their product to the entire mobile user market, they need to write 2 versions of the code. So one for Android and one for iOS. And it became even worse when Windows Mobile was available, because developers had to code 3 apps instead of 2. So the technology that will consolidate the tech into one platform and one language will rule the custom mobile development world. So this is what those huge companies are trying to achieve. And Google and Facebook with their tech, so the Flutter and React Native, they are really close to achieving this goal. And for me, both technologies are kind of 3rd or 4th generation of the cross-platform, because before that we had first, it all started with the web view inside the native app. Then There were frameworks like Ionic or PhoneGap, which introduced something what we called hybrid apps. Later on, Xamarin came, and it was then acquired by Microsoft. And now we have React Native and Flutter. So each generation of those cross-platform tech has resolved some problems that previous generation had. And now we can say that the capabilities of React Native and Flutter are really close to native Android and native iOS development. And I'm talking here about the quality of user experience, capabilities of user interface, the general performance, and the quality of the end product. So, but of course, like we know the history of the cross-platform. There was a first generation, another one, and another one. So the devil is inside the details, and we will help you to understand these details further in the presentation. Okay, we can.
All right. Can I just add? I know from a sales perspective, when people first come to a development company, sometimes they've already got in their mind, yes, that I want to develop in React Native or whatever, and one of the key reasons is because they want to have one code base. But am I right in suggesting that it's sometimes quicker to bridge that code with native code if you're using things like, I don't know, Google Maps with Flutter or Bluetooth with React Native? I'll throw that open to either of you.
This is the devil that I was talking about. So yeah, if you want to implement some low-level features or integration with Bluetooth or integration with other third-party devices, then it will probably take much longer to achieve the high quality of your solution using cross-platform, and native tech is better suited for that. So yeah, product owner needs to understand that. We'll talk about that a little bit later when we will compare native and cross-platform development a little bit more.
Okay, nice. So let's go back to the next question. Actually, Krzysztof, you've mentioned a couple of times that you've mentioned the word native-like. So Flutter and React Native claim that the end product is a native app. So to try and clear this up for us, is it a native app or is it not? And what does it mean?
Yeah, it's a native app, and to explain nativeness, I think it's easiest to explain in opposition to hybrid apps that also Carl mentioned. Hybrid frameworks are based on web views, and when what the user is interacting with is basically a web page displayed in a simple mobile browser. We use them in native development, but it's a workaround for building user interface in these hybrid frameworks. Yeah, so it works, but these browsers are not really meant for that. And so users may experience some UI glitches and hiccups in animations. And React Native produces native apps because it's using views provided by native framework to build its interfaces. So the cross-platform dev defines layout and framework picks the same components I would use to build it in the native project. And that way it eliminates this web view as a middleman and provides these web view related problems. And Flutter takes that even further. It discards native views entirely and provides its own. And that may seem counterintuitive in that nativeness context, but it's meant to eliminate another middleman that needs to bother with assembling the layout. So, I think that nativeness here means that the app is not cutting corners when it's building UI, and it uses tools that are just meant to deliver this native-like user experience.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Krzysztof. But now at the beginning of our webinar, we posted a poll, and a number of you have put in your opinions about, as a percentage, what cost saving can be achieved on development using React Native or Flutter over native development. We've come to this point in the webinar. I think it's probably one of the most asked questions. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carol, but I'm going to address this to you. What is the price difference between native development and cross-platform development?
Before I will answer that, just wanted to answer. We've received 2 questions, the technical questions. Probably we will leave that at the end. At the end, there will be a QA session, so we will answer that later on. And going back to the pricing difference question. So yeah, like you said, Gareth, this is the most common question that we get from our customers when discussing cross-platform frameworks. And to be able to answer that question properly, I probably need to explain a little bit more about how a development team is structured and what typical architecture of mobile app system look like. Let's start with the app architecture. So current IT systems can be really complicated. There are a number of different components and several different technologies, which we call programming languages or development platforms, which we use in the development process. And depending on the kind of the system that is being developed, different architecture patterns can be applied to meet the project goal. But I would say that one thing is common in mobile project, let's say, the front-end applications, so the Android, iOS, the web application used by the end customers of the system are the clients of the backend solution. We call those components the clients of in the client-server architecture. So the front-end application, the client, uses the API that is exposed by the backend server solution. And it's always like that. Mobile apps use the backend where the business logic of the system is implemented. And of course, creating a beautiful front-end app with the best UX and UI is a crucial part of every project, because this is what users are seeing first, when they use the product. But usually it's not more than 40, 50, maybe maximum 60% of the total effort of the project. So there are also other components which I mentioned before. So the backend business logic, database model, API integration, external integration with external systems. And that also needs to be designed and developed for the project to succeed. So cross-platform technology addresses only front-end mobile app part of the development. So only that small part of the project. Maybe for non-tech savvy person looking at the team composition will be easier to visualize the different roles required for the development team to be able to finish the project. So on the left-hand side, you can see the development team, which has a native mobile app component, so the Android and iOS application. And on the right-hand side, you can see the lineup of the development team, which will develop the cross-platform app component. And the differences in the team composition is minor, as you can see. With the cross-platform tag, you're able to replace 2 team members, so the Android and iOS developer, with 1 cross-platform developer. If the team is bigger, for example, if you have 6 native developers in your team, probably you would be able to replace them with 4 cross-platform developers. Having this smaller team is a huge advantage when it comes to the mobile component development process. But on the other hand, it's a minor change to overall team lineup, as you can see. So we've prepared a sample estimation of the project. Here is a small to medium-sized project which is developing a mobile app system with native mobile components, so a separate Android and separate iOS native code. And if you're interested in diving a little bit deeper into this breakdown, you can download our ebook about the cross-platform versus native development. You can find the link in the chat to our website where you can download the ebook. On another slide, you can see the calculation of the project estimation with cross-platform app component. So the same project with native mobile app component will take a little over 200 man days. Using a cross-platform, it might take only about 164 man days. So this is the total number of working days of the team, of whole team. And finally, we have a project cost comparison. So in monetary terms, the price difference between native and cross-platform development in this example, which equates to a little under $15,000, it's only a saving of approximately 18% of the total development cost. So in fact, the cost reduction depends on the project, and sometimes it can be as little as low as 5%. And especially if you factor in complicated user interface, which will be hard to implement in cross-platform, or if your project has a really big, complicated backend server solution that will take most of the development time. I would say that in some certain projects, we are able to save a little more, but in our experience, the maximum has been around 20% mark. So that's the answer to that maybe simple question, but the answer is a little bit more complicated so that you will understand the whole context.
I see someone very sneakily changed their answer. So it went from 2 people to 3 people who chose a maximum of 20%. So very well, very good explanation. Thank you, Karol. And it sort of brings us to the next question in terms of the development time. So is there a difference in development time when using cross-platform?
Yeah, this is a good question. We actually look at the question from 2 different angles. So if we consider the overall project timeline, the answer is no. The timeline is the same for both projects. But if we are speaking about the front end, so only the mobile app component, the answer is yes. It takes longer for development team to create a mobile app compared to the timeline of the native of one native platform development project. So to dive a little bit deeper into that the question. So in the previous example, we've estimated the effort for Android development for 40 working days and cross-platform development for 55 working days. Only the app component, let's say. So the cross-platform takes a little bit about 40% more. So if you have only one developer in it will take 3 more weeks to develop the same mobile app. But if we compare the engagement of the QA, the difference is minimal. So only 3 days, 3 working days difference. So 34 working days as opposed to 31 working days. So the overall difference of the project timeline is not significant at all. And to understand a little bit more, the biggest advantage of the cross-platform is having just one mobile app development team. This is really huge difference. We've developed dozens of different mobile apps, and I can say that managing 2 different mobile teams sometimes is really challenging. Smaller app, mobile app team means less project management effort, less people-related issues, better team performance, better communication. So it's much easier to manage the team, especially. Also, the release management is much easier with the cross-platform. So the development team can release both Android and iOS versions simultaneously. On the other hand, we've mentioned that a little bit before, the cross-platform is much younger compared to native Android and native iOS. This leads to increased number of bugs, weaker development performance, which basically means a much slower development speed, which you can see in the earlier estimate. And the really important thing to remember here is that testing of the native app compared to cross-platform app is the same, because tests needs to be run separately for Android and iOS, even if the app is built with the cross-platform framework. Tester needs to check if both versions work correctly. So the one that was built from the cross-platform framework, which is run on Android, and the other one which is run on iOS. Sometimes there are some differences in how the cross-platform app runs on different devices and different versions of the operating systems. I hope that I've answered the question.
Yeah, for sure. I think the important thing to understand there is that the overall timeline, yes, stays the same. Yes. So there's some reduction in project management costs. There's the similar engagement of QA engineers and the possibility of longer back-end development. So all in all, the overall project stays the same. Yes, in time of length. But
that's correct. There are some other advantages and disadvantages that you as a product owner, you just need to understand it. Yeah.
So we'll move to the next question again, another business-oriented question. What commercial risks are there, if any, of choosing cross-platform over to native development? And just before you answer that, I'd say thank you very much to those people who are putting questions in the question field. We'll get to those in a moment. Probably Krzysztof will be able to answer those. But Karol, what can you tell us about the commercial risks?
So if you could just share the slide that I'm sharing. So yeah, this is the question that we get from our customers, and there are a few concerns here with the cross-platform that you need to know about. Flutter is only 3 years old. React Native is only 5 years old. So young technology means there are less experts available on the market, more technical issues and bugs that we get, and lack of expertise in the teams. The teams is still learning the tech. And in the market, and also in our itCraft team, you can find native Android and native iOS experts with 10 or 12 years of experience working with these platforms, so the Android and iOS standard development kits. And having such an experienced person in the team doubles or triples the performance of the whole development team. And currently it's impossible to find such an experienced developer with React Native or Flutter knowledge. It's impossible or really, really hard. And also, we've noticed that only 10% of native Android and iOS developers, the ones that are experienced in mobile development field, are willing to learn new cross-platform technologies, so React Native or Flutter. That means that junior developers are more likely to learn that new technology. We're very lucky to have Krzysztof and other specialists in our itCraft team who love cross-platform tech and are already experienced with that tech. So that's very good. And the other risk is what we already mentioned about Xamarin history. So new technologies are being replaced by even newer ones. So mobile development world is still very young. It's only 12, 13 years old if we analyze only iOS and Android platform. And itCraft has been in that for 8 or 9 years already. And I'm not exactly sure, but if I would have to guess, I would say that before React Native and Xamarin, there were 10 different popular cross-platform technologies introduced in the past that are currently not used by anyone else or became very, very niche. So the last victim of that tech war was Xamarin, let's say. This is currently very niche tech on the market, still being used by some enterprise, but I would say its popularity already died, and the support of this tech will last for only a few more years, probably. Flutter and React Native have taken over the market. So this is very important to understand. Probably if you choose React Native or Flutter in 4 years from now, there will be new, better technology. Or maybe Flutter or React Native will rule the custom mobile development, cross-platform development world, yeah, and will stay a little bit longer. But we can't say that. We will never know.
Okay. Very good. You mentioned junior developers, so we might answer one of the questions, the last question that arrived. Maybe Krzysztof, I can throw to you with a question.
Yeah, please do.
The question is, what about learning curves? Which is easier to learn? So Karol just mentioned that there was a lack of desire from some senior developers to change direction and move to cross-platform technologies. Can you tell us a little bit about your introduction into cross-platform technologies and answer Maciej's question about the learning curves and what might be easier to learn in terms of React Native or Flutter?
Yeah, actually, I have pretty strong opinion about that because I remember when I tried to learn React Native as a Android developer, I had a hard time. I hated it actually because it's based on React, on a web technology that I didn't really knew. And when I started Flutter, it was completely other way around, mostly because Flutter has just gorgeous documentation. It has, cookbooks for different stuff. It has introductions per technology that you may already knew. So if you know iOS, Android, you're doing web development with Redux, for example, you will be taken step by step. It will come with you, just holding your hand to introduce you to Flutter. So yeah, because of that, I would say Flutter. Also, Google has very good conferences and educational series on YouTube.
Why am I not surprised that our head Flutter developer would recommend to choose Flutter development over React Native? Very good. Thank you, Krzysztof.
Yeah, of course, please not. If you know React already, probably you would go for React Native because, it's you already have knowledge and it may be easier for you.
This is what I wanted to mention, that if you have origins from your origins, your knowledge, you have a knowledge from web development and you love React, probably you will also love React Native. But if your origins comes from Android, Kotlin, and Java development, then probably Dart would be better suited for you. So, it's like this.
Nice one. Let's go to our next question. Some of these questions are similar, but they have some real commercial implications. So one of the questions we often get, Karol, is when should I choose native and when should I choose cross-platform? Could you give us some insight on that?
Yeah, I've put some. You can see some recommendations for a product owner, let's say. So when you should watch out for a cross-platform tech. So one of the biggest mistakes is that product owners, they choose the tech sometimes before they finish functional requirements gathering, and we always recommend choosing the tech after the final process of requirements gathering, and in some cases even after UX and UI design. So that's the first recommendation. Sometimes commercial decisions have to be made. Do you adjust the UX and UI to match your existing tech, or do you try to achieve the best UX and UI and replace your existing tech? Of course, the latter is the better for a long-term perspective, and of course for your users too. But if you have to weigh the financial implications of such a decision, and other things are what we've mentioned before. So low-level code should always be done in native language. These are the Bluetooth integrations, Google Maps, which is still in a preview mode in the Flutter, for example, or other IoT and external devices integration. This should always be done in native language. Also, when your team is inexperienced in cross-platform, you shouldn't go that way. You should stick to native. If you have experienced people working with Kotlin, Android Kotlin, or iOS Swift, and when you're aiming for the highest performance of the app, you should also choose a native instead of the cross-platform. I will give you some more recommendations at the end of the webinar as well. So I will add a little bit to that topic at the end.
Okay, let's move to the next question then. It's actually a question that pops up from people who are considering cross-platform development and want to know which apps have been built in Flutter. Are there commercially successful apps that have been built in Flutter, being such a new framework?
Could share my screen. There are a few logos here. Of course, you can see some examples from Google portfolio. So Google Ads, mobile application, Google Assistant application. Google is doing the marketing for its own tech, that's obvious. But also they've managed to acquire big customers like Alibaba Group or Groupon, SpaceX, eBay, BMW. You can find few more logos on the Flutter landing page. But it's still young tech. So there are more and more companies that are starting using Flutter.
Okay, and the same question actually about React Native. Which apps have been built using React Native?
I've also shared a few logos of the companies. And of course, here we have the same situation. So Facebook is promoting that tech. The Facebook ads has been built with React Native. Also, a part of the Instagram application. This needs to be emphasized here because people sometimes think that the whole Facebook application or the whole Instagram application were built with React Native. That's not true. So only a part of their solutions were built with React Native. Also Walmart, Skype, and here I've crossed out Airbnb because they've on their tech blog a few years ago, then they mentioned that they are choosing React Native for their main app, and after 1.5 years, they've decided to go back to native. Yeah. So, and they've provided their recommendation and why they did that and so on. So you can read more about that on their blog, on their tech blog.
Nice one. It's someone just noticed that SpaceX and Tesla chose different techs. Yes. So,
okay, yeah.
Elon Musk mustn't have a decision in that
strategic decision to not consolidate the tech.
All right, let's move on to the next question. So we want to talk about the commercial benefits over native development over cross-platform. Again, another really hot topic, a hotly debated topic when it comes to choosing tech. So, Carol, will get you to answer that one as well.
Yeah, sure. So I didn't put all the other logos on this slide because it won't fit. Many companies have chosen native development, and if you were to research the top 100 apps in the market, you would probably find out that 95% or more have been built natively. I'm not talking about games, of course. I'm talking about, let's say, commercial apps. But still, native development is the most popular, I would say. And in the end, it's a commercial decision. You always have to ask yourself the question: if your competitor chooses to build his app using native technology, how will this affect your business? Is the 90% cost saving in the development from our example today, so $15K worth the risk commercially? Yeah. So you need to think about that question. And if your app is making tens of thousands or even millions of dollars per year, then 15K cost saving in the development isn't that great or of an incentive. So, but however, the purpose of your app, if the purpose of your app is to just provide some information, or you're validating your startup business model, then 15K could be added to your marketing efforts, and that might make sense. So in the end, cross-platform definitely will have its own share in mobile development market. And I think that this share is growing, still growing, and growing faster because React Native and Flutter, which are a new generation of cross-platform development frameworks, they really work. They solve many, many problems. Yeah, that's my final thoughts.
Okay. Very nice. So let's attack some of the questions we've got. Always dangerous to try and answer all of them on the fly, but maybe, I don't know, Karol or Krzysztof will. I
will try to quickly answer Maciek's question: which one is easiest to deploy on production? If it's a tech question, I'm not tech-related question. I'm not, or differently. So both React Native and Flutter, they deliver build tools. So both with React Native and Flutter, you can build your production packages easily. So, and at the end, both needs to be deployed to App Store and Google Play. So I would say that there's no difference. Both platforms provide appropriate tools to build version for Android App Store, for Android Google Play, and for iOS App Store. And it's both are easy to integrate with your continuous integration tool. So I would say there's no difference. But if you, Maciek, meant something else, you can add to that question a little bit more.
Krzysztof, can you answer one of the questions we have? Maybe.
All right. So, I saw this, how does NativeScript compare to React and Flutter? And disclaimer, I had no idea about NativeScript until now. But I just looked it up real quick, and it seems that it's yeah, it's another cross-platform language, but framework, and it's based on the Angular. So yeah, I don't know exactly how it compares to React and Flutter, but the first thing I would look up is does it work the way React Native and Flutter does? Like producing these native-like apps, or is it a hybrid framework that uses WebView?
It was a while ago that one of our senior front-end developers did the research of native script. It was more than a year ago. I'm not sure what's the current status, but when we've been doing that research, the comparison between native script and React and Flutter was against native script. Yeah, so it was for React Native and Flutter, because the build tools were not as good as the ones from React and Flutter. Also, the quality of the generated app wasn't that good. I would say we had some problems with that tech, and if we face some problems at the very early stage of the research, it means for us, no, it doesn't make sense. From what I've heard in my network, there are some companies that uses native script, but the companies that uses native scripts are the ones that have Angular teams. So it's like an addition to their team. Yeah, like when a customer come and say, "Oh, can you build a mobile app for me too?" And they say, "Yeah, we can." And they use native script because they don't know any other mobile tech. So I would say at the end, I would say they are losing with React and Flutter. I wouldn't go that way.
Okay, and maybe we've got just one or two more minutes to answer. You touched on this, Krzysztof, but Łukasz has a question. What are the known weaknesses of Flutter? We mentioned some things. Can you maybe confirm or elaborate a little bit on what you were saying?
I talked about this including widgets thing. So you can include Google Maps, and in fact you can include any other already existing widgets. So if, for example, you want to build some side app, not your main product, but some other smaller app, and you want to reuse any existing widgets that are in your main app, well, you can do this for now. It's not possible with Flutter. From the dev perspective, I also not really a fan of the way the UI is built, because it's really granular. It grows. The code grows significantly, and it can be quite tedious to read and build it.
Okay. Well, we come to the end. So we've answered the 13 questions that our network came up with, and we thank you very much for that. We thank everyone for joining us till the end. And
thank you for joining us.
As usual, if anyone's got any other questions, or maybe we didn't elaborate enough on something, you can reach out to either Carol, Krzysztof, or myself at webinar@itcraftapps.com. And of course, we'll be happy to have a conversation and chat a little bit more about this subject. We're passionate about it. But I guess to summarize, up to 20% saving in development. You can produce good quality, world-class apps using Flutter and React Native, but depending on the complexity of your project, there are some commercial decisions that need to be really considered before choosing the tech. So some people want to choose the tech first before actually diving deeper into the business goals and models. So these are all things that we need to consider, and while people are still building mobile apps, we'll always have this conversation. And as Karol said, the company who can build something which is going to deploy equally good on iOS and Android, they're going to win this battle. But until then, We're going to continue to develop native apps. We're going to continue to develop apps in React Native. We're going to develop apps in Flutter and anything else that comes along. So thanks very much for everyone. And we look forward to joining you on our next webinar. So thanks, Carol. Thanks, Christoph. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I was happy to be here.
Thanks. Bye.